In 1848, the French artist Frédéric Souriau visualized a world composed of democratic and social republics. He depicted a massive procession of distinct nations marching to pay tribute to the Statue of Liberty. In the foreground, shattered symbols of absolute monarchs signal that traditional empires were ending, making way for the nation-state. This antique map reveals the reality Souriau wanted to leave behind. Before the 19th century, Europe was a chaotic patchwork of overlapping kingdoms, principalities, and duchies, with no clear national borders. These fragmented lands were the private estates of a wealthy aristocracy. This small, privileged class held absolute control over a majority of poor peasants, who had no say in how they were governed. The cohesive map of Europe we recognize today wasn't the result of a peaceful transition. It was forged in a direct, often violent, ideological collision. The French Revolution acted as the catalyst for this change. Between 1789 and 1799, the uprising in France successfully toppled the monarchy and transferred power into the hands of the citizens. To maintain this new power, the revolutionaries had to create a shared identity. They introduced the concepts of la patrie, the fatherland, and le citoyen, the citizen, to emphasize a united community with equal rights under a single constitution. They used specific cultural tools to unify the public. A new tricolor flag replaced the royal standard, a national anthem was composed, and French was established as the common national language. This new sense of national identity was exported by radical groups like the Jacobin clubs. They established networks across neighboring borders, spreading revolutionary ideas into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and Italy. By toppling the monarchy and defining the rights of the citizen, the French Revolution established a standard for national identity that would define European politics for the next century. As these ideas spread, a new class of industrialists and businessmen gained influence. This educated middle class became the primary advocates for political and economic change. For these professionals, liberalism centered on individual freedom and equality before the law. Most importantly, it meant the freedom of the market and the removal of state-imposed barriers on the movement of goods and capital. Napoleon Bonaparte became the unexpected vehicle for these ideals. He integrated revolutionary principles into the legal system through the Napoleonic Code of 1804. This civil code established equality before the law and secured private property rights, effectively dismantling the legal advantages previously held by the aristocracy. Napoleon physically unified the market by abolishing the feudal system and standardizing weights and measures. He also replaced a complex web of regional currencies with just two. The establishment of standardized banking and financial infrastructure facilitated the free movement of capital, providing the middle class with the tools necessary for large-scale commerce. Napoleon had modernized the economic landscape, providing the middle class with the standardized infrastructure they needed to wield power over the old aristocracy. After Napoleon's defeat in 1815, the ideological pendulum swung back. The traditional aristocratic order gathered at the Congress of Vienna to restore the old world. Conservative leaders sought to re-establish traditional institutions, including the Bourbon monarchy in France and the authority of the Church, believing these hierarchies were essential for social stability. These autocratic regimes used strict censorship and surveillance to suppress dissent. They viewed middle-class demands for economic freedom as a direct threat. This conservative restoration attempted to force an increasingly wealthy and modernizing society back into a rigid, traditional structure that it had already outgrown. By the 1830s, conservative monarchs struggled to govern a population that had already experienced legal equality and market freedom. These expectations had become deeply rooted in the public consciousness. Economic hardship accelerated the unrest. Europe faced population booms, massive unemployment, and rising food prices. In 1845, these pressures drove the Silesian weavers to revolt against their contractors, a sign of the widespread pauperism across the continent. In response to government suppression, liberal revolutionaries formed secret societies. They used shared culture, language, and folk stories to foster nationalist sentiment and organize resistance against the absolute monarchs. Giuseppe Mazzini emerged as a key figure in this underground movement. After being exiled, he founded Young Italy, a society dedicated to the unification of the Italian states into a single independent nation. These events represented the calculated explosion of an artificially suppressed middle class, whose economic and political ambitions could no longer be contained by the old regime. The tension peaked in 1848 with a wave of revolutions across Europe. Men and women of the liberal middle classes took advantage of popular unrest to demand the creation of nation-states built on parliamentary principles. Frederick Soryu's 1848 lithograph reflected the actual ideological struggle tearing across the continent as it happened. While conservative military force repressed many of these liberal initiatives, the nation-state had become the permanent political baseline for Europe. The modern borders of Europe are the evidence of this transition. The fragmented principalities of the past were replaced by unified nations like Germany and Italy. The modern European nation-state emerged from the collision between the market-driven vision of the middle class and the fading grip of traditional conservatism. The crowns were shattered. The vision of the new world was now the reality.